In Dead Lantern, a blacksmith's wife faces a heart-wrenching choice when her vanished first love returns, forcing her to confront old wounds and new truths. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from. Today, the morning sun beat down on Dead Lantern without mercy. Dust swirled through the streets as Celia Hart hung sheets on the clothesline behind her small house. At 25, she had the kind of beauty that came from strength rather than delicacy. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple knot, and her hands, though small, worked with purpose. 5 years in Dead Lantern had changed her. Once she had been Celia Grant, a girl with dreams as big as the eastern sky. Now she was Celia Hart, wife of the town blacksmith, a woman who kept her eyes down and her past buried. "More water for the wash, Miles?" she called over her shoulder. Miles. Hart stepped out from his workshop, wiping soot from his hands. At 30, he wasn't handsome in the way that turned women's heads, but his face had a kindness that Celia had come to trust. His shoulders were broad from years at the forge, and his eyes were the color of a summer storm. "I'll fetch it," he said, reaching for the bucket. "You've been working since dawn." Celia smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, but it was honest. The sheets won't hang themselves. This was their life, simple, quiet, built on respect rather than passion. Miles had never asked about the shadows that sometimes darkened her eyes. He'd never pushed when she woke, gasping from nightmares. He simply offered his steady presence, and for that Celia was grateful. They had been married for 3 years. Miles had found her working at the town's only hotel, scrubbing floors for pennies and sleeping in a closet-sized room. He'd offered marriage like someone might offer a coat in winter, practical, necessary. She'd accepted for the same reasons. It wasn't love, not at first, but it was safety, peace, a second chance. "I'm heading to the Sullivan place," Miles said, setting down the filled bucket. "Horse needs new shoes. I should be back before supper." Celia nodded, dipping her hands into the cool water. "I'll have something waiting." Miles hesitated, then leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. His touch was always careful, as if she might break or run. In the beginning, she might have. Now she leaned into his warmth just for a moment. "Thank you," he said, the words carrying more weight than they should. After he left, Celia continued with the washing. Her hands worked automatically, while her mind drifted to the letter she'd received last week. Her aunt from back east had written, asking about her life, sending news from home. Celia hadn't answered. Some doors were better left closed. The town of Dead Lantern lived up to its name most days. Just a handful of buildings stretched along. The main street, a church that saw more dust than prayers and scattered houses clinging to the edges like afterthoughts. People came here to disappear, to shed their names and pasts like snakeskin. It was perfect for Celia, who had arrived with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart so broken she thought it might never beat properly again. She'd never told Miles about Weston Hale, about the boy with laughing eyes who had promised her the world, about how her father's gambling debts had brought men with guns to their door, about waking up to find her father dead and Weston gone, vanished like morning mist without even a goodbye. The shame of it all had driven her west, away from the whispers and pitying glances, away from the memory of a love that had abandoned her when she needed it most. By midday, the heat was almost unbearable. Celia finished the washing and retreated inside, where the thick walls kept the worst of the sun at bay. She was kneading dough for bread when she heard the hoofbeats. Travelers weren't uncommon in Dead Lantern, though few stayed long. The town was a waypoint, not a destination. Celia didn't bother looking up until she heard the horse stop right outside. Something made her wipe her hands and go to the window. Something like instinct, or maybe fate. The rider had his back to her, tall in the saddle with shoulders burned, brown by the sun. He wore a dusty hat and clothes that had seen better days. Nothing remarkable, nothing to make her heart skip a beat. Then he turned. Time stopped. The air froze in Celia's lungs. The world narrowed to a single point of impossible reality. Weston Hale older, harder, his boyish face now chiseled by sun and wind, but unmistakably him. The curve of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the way he swung down from the saddle like he owned the earth beneath his feet. Celia stepped back from the window, her hands shaking so badly that flour dusted the floor like snow. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not when she'd finally built something solid from the ashes of her old life. She heard his boots on the porch. The knock that followed seemed to echo through her bones. For a wild moment she thought about not answering, about hiding until he gave up and rode away, but Celia Hart wasn't a coward, even when she wanted to be. She opened the door. Weston's eyes, blue as a summer sky, widened. Whatever he'd been expecting, it wasn't the woman who stood before him, not the simple dress and apron, not the wedding ring that caught the sunlight. Not the wariness that had replaced the adoration he'd once taken for granted. "Celia," he said, her name a prayer and a question. She gripped the door frame to keep from swaying. "What are you doing here, Weston? I've been looking for you." His voice was deeper than she remembered. "For a long time." "Well, you found me." Her words came out flat. "Now you can leave with a clear conscience." Hurt flashed across his face. "Is that all you have to say to me? After 5 years? What should I say?" Anger sparked, burning away the shock. "Thank you for leaving me alone with my father's body and men who wanted payment I couldn't give. Thank you for not even saying goodbye." Weston stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the dust and leather on him, close enough to see the regret in his eyes. "I didn't leave you, Celia. I went to get help. When I came back, you were gone." Lies. They had to be lies. But why would he bother after all this time? "It doesn't matter anymore," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "I have a different life now, a husband." Weston's jaw tightened. His gaze dropped to the ring on her finger. "You married someone else." The words were quiet, dangerous. Then his eyes met hers again, and there was something in them that made her heart stutter. "But I didn't come here to leave empty-handed." Before Celia could respond, she heard another set of hoofbeats. Miles returning early. Her worlds were about to collide, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Miles saw the stranger at his door from a distance, saw the way Celia stood, tense and still as a deer before a hunter. Something cold settled in his stomach. He'd always known this day might come, the day her past caught up with her. He dismounted slowly, taking the time to gather himself. Whatever happened next, Miles wouldn't let Celia face it alone. He'd promised to be her shelter, and he meant to keep that promise. "Celia," he called, approaching with measured steps. "Everything all right?" She turned to him, and the look on her face told him everything he needed to know. Whoever this man was, he mattered. He mattered in ways that Miles had never allowed himself to ask about. "Miles," her voice shook slightly. "This is an old friend from back east." The stranger turned, sizing Miles up with a glance that felt like a challenge. He was younger than Miles, with the lean, hard look of a man who lived in the saddle. Handsome in a way that made women notice. "Weston Hale," the man said, not offering his hand. The name hit Miles like a physical blow, not because he recognized it, but because he could see the effect it had on Celia. She'd never mentioned a Weston Hale, but Miles could read the history between them as clearly as tracks in fresh snow. "Miles Hart," he responded, moving to stand beside his wife. Not touching her, but close enough that she could lean on him if she chose. "Celia's husband." Something dangerous flashed in Weston's eyes. "So I've been told." The tension crackled between them like heat lightning. Miles could feel Celia trembling beside him, though whether from fear or something else he couldn't tell. "Why don't you come inside?" Miles said, surprising himself. "Sounds like you two have some catching up to do." Celia shot him a startled glance, but Miles kept his expression calm. He'd never been one for confrontation, but neither would he hide from whatever this was. Inside, the house felt smaller than usual, with Weston's presence filling it. Celia moved mechanically, setting out cups, pouring coffee that no one really wanted. Her hands shook so badly that Miles gently took over, guiding her to sit. "How did you find me?" she finally asked, looking at Weston. "Wasn't easy." He took off his hat, revealing hair the color of wheat. "Took me the better part of 2 years. Your aunt finally let slip you'd headed west." "My aunt knew you were looking for me. Everyone knew. I never made a secret of it." His gaze burned into her. "Not like you made a secret of leaving, Miles." Watched the color drain from Celia's face. "I think," he said quietly, "that there's more to this story than I know." Weston turned to him, challenge written in every line of his body. "You married her without knowing who she was, where she came from." "I married her knowing who she is," Miles corrected. "The past is hers to share or keep, a flash of something." Like respect crossed Weston's face, quickly replaced by determination. "Well, I'm making it my business now. Celia and I were engaged to be married back in Missouri. Then her father got himself killed over cards and everything went to hell." Celia made a sound like she'd been struck. Miles fought the urge to go to her to shield her from words that were clearly causing her pain. "That's not the whole story," she whispered. "No, it's not." Weston leaned forward. "The whole story is that I went to get help, to get money to pay off the vultures circling your door. When I came back 3 days later, you were gone. Vanished. No note. No word of where you'd gone." 3 days? Celia's voice rose. "My father was dead on our floor for 3 days while I waited for you. Men came to the house, threatened me, told me what they'd take instead of money. I had no choice but to run." Miles felt sick. The pieces of Celia's nightmares, her fear of strangers, her reluctance to speak of her past, they were falling into terrible place. "I didn't know." Weston's voice dropped. "I swear to God, Celia, I didn't know they'd come so soon. I was trying to save you. You left me." The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. "And now, I've found you." Weston stood, towering over the table. "I didn't ride 1,000 miles to tip my hat and ride away again." Miles rose to meet him. He wasn't a fighter by nature, but something in him refused to back down from this man who had burst into their quiet life. "What exactly did you come for, Mr. Hale?" Weston's eyes shifted from Miles to Celia, who sat frozen between them. "I came to take her back, to finish what we started." His voice dropped, meant for Celia alone. "I never stopped looking for you, never stopped loving you." The words hit their mark. Celia's breath caught and Miles saw it, saw the way something long buried flickered to life in her eyes. It was the thing he'd always feared, that the love she'd settled for with him was a pale shadow of what she'd known before. "She's made her choice," Miles said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "She's my wife now." Weston didn't back down. "A wife who still wears this next to her heart." He pulled something from his pocket, a small, tarnished locket that Miles had seen Celia touch sometimes, though she'd never opened it in his presence. Celia's hand flew to her throat, where the chain should have been hidden beneath her dress. "How did you get that?" she whispered. "Found it caught on a nail by the door," Weston said. "Seems like some things aren't as buried as you'd like to think." Miles felt the floor shift beneath him, not because of the locket itself, but because of what it represented, a piece of Celia's heart that had never truly been his. "I think," he said carefully, "that my wife and I need to talk. Alone." Weston smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'll be staying at the hotel. But this conversation isn't over." He looked directly at Miles. "You want to keep her, Miles Hart? Then stand for her." The challenge hung in the air between them. "She's not a prize to be won," Miles said quietly. "No," Weston agreed, putting his hat back on. "She's worth far more than that." He turned to Celia. "I'll be waiting for your answer." After he left, the silence in the small house was deafening. Miles watched Celia, who hadn't moved, who looked like she might shatter if touched. "Celia," he said softly, "look at me." Slowly she raised her eyes to his. They were swimming with tears and something else. Confusion, longing, shame. "If he still owns your heart," Miles said, each word costing him dearly, "just tell me now." "I won't hold you captive." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know what I feel anymore." Miles nodded, accepting the truth of it even as it cut him. "Then we'll figure it out together." Outside, the wind picked up, sending dust swirling through the streets of Dead Lantern. A storm was coming, the kind that changed landscapes forever. That night, Celia lay awake beside Miles, listening to his steady breathing. For the first time in their marriage, he'd slept on the far edge of the bed, careful not to touch her. The space between them felt like a canyon. In the darkness, she pressed her hand to her throat, where the locket had rested for 5 years. Now it lay on the bedside table, returned to her by Miles with no questions asked. Inside that locket was a small portrait of Weston, painted when they were young and foolish and believed in forever. She hadn't looked at it in years, hadn't needed. The image was burned into her memory. Weston Hale, the boy who had promised her the stars, then disappeared when her world collapsed. Miles Hart, the man who had offered shelter when she needed it most, asking nothing but her companionship. In return, 2 men, 2 kinds of love. And Celia, caught between past and present, unable to move forward until she faced what she'd left behind. Dawn was breaking when she finally drifted into uneasy sleep. Her last conscious thought was that tomorrow would bring a reckoning for all of them. In town, Weston sat on the edge of his hotel bed, turning his hat in his hands. He'd found her. After all this time, all the searching, all the dead ends, he'd found Celia. But he'd lost her too, to a quiet blacksmith with steady hands and careful eyes. "Not for long," he whispered to the empty room. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Outside, the wind continued to rise, carrying dust and change on its back. Dead Lantern would soon witness a storm unlike any it had seen before, a storm of the heart, where old wounds would be reopened and new ones created, and when it was over, nothing would ever be the same again. Morning came to Dead Lantern with unforgiving brightness. Celia rose early, her eyes gritty from lack of sleep. Miles was already gone, the impression of his body on the bed the only sign he'd been there at all. She found a note on the kitchen table. "At the forge, take your time." 4 simple words that told her everything about the man she'd married. Even now, with their life together hanging by a thread, he was giving her space to think, to choose. Celia dressed slowly, her fingers fumbling with buttons as her mind raced. What did she want? Who did she want? The questions chased each other, like wolves around a campfire. Outside, Dead Lantern was waking up. She could hear Mrs. Parsons sweeping her porch across the street, the clang of the general store's bell as Mr. Cooper opened for business. Normal sounds, everyday sounds, but nothing felt normal anymore. She walked to the forge, drawn by habit and the need to see Miles, to understand what she was risking if she let her past pull her away. The smithy glowed orange in the morning light, the heat of the forge creating waves in the air. Miles worked with his back to the door, muscles shifting beneath his shirt as he hammered red-hot metal. His movements were sure and strong, a man who knew his place in the world. Celia watched him for a moment, unseen. This was the man who had offered her safety when she had nothing, who had never pushed for more than she could give, who had built a life around her silences and nightmares without complaint. "Morning," she said softly. Miles turned, lowering his hammer. His eyes, tired and wary, searched her face. "Did you sleep?" "Not much." She stepped into the warmth of the forge. "You were gone when I woke up. Thought you might need some time alone." He set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" The directness of the question startled her. "Miles, You don't have to answer now." His voice was gentle. "But we both know he didn't ride all this way, just to tip his hat and leave. He wants you back." "Celia." She looked down at her hands, at the simple gold band Miles had placed there 3 years ago. "I don't know what I want." "Yes, you do." Miles moved closer, but still didn't touch her. "You're just afraid to say it out loud. Afraid of hurting me, maybe, or afraid of being hurt again yourself." Tears burned behind her eyes. How could he understand her so well and still be so wrong? She didn't know what she wanted, that was the problem. Her heart was split right down the middle. "I never told you about him," she said. "About us." "You didn't have to. I could see it in your eyes whenever something reminded you of before. Of home." Miles looked at her directly. "I never asked because I figured if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me." Celia's throat tightened. "Weston and I grew up together. Childhood sweethearts, I suppose you'd call it. He worked for my father sometimes, breaking horses. We were going to get married, build a little house near my father's place." The memories rose like dust, choking her. Then my father got in deep with cards. Men came around threatening him, threatening me. Miles's jaw tightened, but he let her continue. One night they came to collect. My father couldn't pay. There was a fight. A gun went off. She wrapped her arms around herself. I found my father dead the next morning. Weston was gone, just gone. No note, no word, nothing. And you thought he'd abandoned you. What else was I supposed to think? Celia's voice rose. I waited for him to come back. For 3 days I waited, with my father's body in the house and men watching from the street. When I couldn't wait any more, I ran. Miles was silent for a long moment. And now he says he went for help, that he came back for you. He says a lot of things. Bitterness edged her words. 5 years too late. Do you believe him? The question hung between them. Simple and devastating. Did she believe Weston? Could she? I don't know, she admitted. I want to, but even if it's true, he still left me alone when I needed him most. And I've been here. Miles said it without accusation, just stating a fact. Every day for 3 years. Yes, she met his eyes. You have. Before either could say more, a shadow darkened the doorway. Weston stood there, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, though his tone made it clear he didn't care if he was. Miles straightened, his expression cooling. What can I do for you, Mr. Hale? My horse threw a shoe on the way into town. Figured the blacksmith might be able to help. Weston's eyes flicked to Celia, then back to Miles. If you're not too busy. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't about a horseshoe. This was about marking territory, about forcing Miles to either serve him or refuse him outright. I can look at it, Miles said evenly. Bring him around. Celia watched the exchange with growing unease. The tension between the two men was a living thing, dangerous and unpredictable. Weston nodded, then turned to Celia. Thought maybe afterward you might show me around town. For old times. Saki. Miles's hands tightened on the rag he was holding, but his voice remained calm. That's up to Celia. They both looked at her, waiting for her answer. It struck her then, how different they were. Weston with his bold demands and flashing eyes, Miles with his quiet strength and careful distance. I have things to do at home, she said finally. Disappointment flashed across Weston's face, quickly replaced by determination. Another time then, he touched the brim of his hat. I'll bring the horse around. After he left, the forge seemed to expand, the air easier to breathe. You don't have to stay, Miles said quietly. If you want to go with him, I won't stop you. Celia looked at him, this man who kept offering her freedom even when it might break him. I know, she said. And for the first time since Weston's arrival, she touched Miles, her hand light on his arm. I'll see you at home. The walk back to their house felt longer than usual. Celia could feel eyes on her from windows and porches. News traveled fast. In Dead Lantern. By now everyone would know about the stranger who had ridden in, about the history written in the tense lines of Celia's body when she saw him. Mrs. Cooper stopped her outside the general store, curiosity poorly disguised as concern. Heard there was some excitement at your place yesterday, she said, adjusting her shawl. A visitor from back east. Just someone passing through, Celia replied, keeping her voice neutral. Handsome fellow, Mrs. Cooper pressed, asking all around. Town about you. Seems mighty interested for someone just passing through. Celia's stomach tightened. If you'll excuse me, I have bread in the oven. She hurried away, feeling the weight of the woman's gaze on her back. By nightfall, speculation would be running wild. The quiet life she'd built was unraveling thread by thread. At home, Celia moved through her chores mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She kept seeing Weston's face when he'd pulled out her locket, the triumph in his eyes, as if he'd proven something important. And maybe he had. She'd kept that locket all these years, worn it next to her heart, even as she shared Miles's bed. What did that say about her? About her marriage? The sound of horses outside pulled her from her thoughts. Not one horse, but several. Voices raised in greeting, in challenge. Celia went to the window. Miles and Weston stood in the street, their horses a few paces away. Around them, a small crowd had gathered. Mr. Cooper from the store, the Sullivan brothers, even old Doc Hanson. They were watching the two men with the eager anticipation of people starved for entertainment. "What's going on?" Celia asked, stepping onto the porch. Mr. Cooper turned, his eyes bright with excitement. "Seems your visitor has been running his mouth at the saloon, telling anyone who'd listen about how he's come to take you back east." Horror washed over Celia. "What? Said your husband stole you away?" Mrs. Parsons joined in, clearly relishing the drama. "Said you were his girl first and he means to get you back." Celia looked at Miles, expecting anger, but his face was set, in lines of quiet resignation, as if he'd been expecting this all along. Weston, on the other hand, looked fierce and alive, energy radiating from him like heat from a stove. When he saw Celia, he straightened, his hand moving to the gun at his hip in an unconscious gesture. "There she is," he called, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The woman I've been searching for all these years." The crowd turned to look at her, faces alight with curiosity and judgment. Celia felt exposed, as if her skin had been peeled away to reveal all her secrets beneath. "Weston, stop this," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Whatever you're doing, just stop." "I'm fighting for you," he replied, moving toward her. "Like I should have done 5 years ago." Miles stepped between them, his presence solid as a wall. "That's enough. You've said your piece. Now leave my wife alone." Weston's eyes narrowed. "Your wife?" He laughed, a harsh sound that set Celia's teeth on edge. "She was mine long before she was yours, blacksmith, and she would have stayed mine if things had gone different." "But they didn't," Miles said quietly, "and choices were made, choices that you need to respect." "Do I?" Weston moved closer until he was toe-to-toe with Miles. "What if those choices were based on lies? What if she only chose you because she thought I'd abandoned her?" The crowd murmured, eating up every word. Celia wanted to scream, to tell them all to go home, to mind their own business. But she stood frozen, watching the confrontation unfold with a sense of helpless dread. "Doesn't matter why she chose," Miles said. "Only matters that she did. And what if she chooses again?" Weston's voice dropped, meant for Miles alone, but in the hushed street it carried. "What if, knowing the truth, she chooses differently?" Miles didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was steady, despite the pain in his eyes. "Then that's her right." Something like respect flickered across Weston's face, quickly replaced by determination. "I came to take her back," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You want to keep her, Miles Hart? Then stand for her." The challenge hung in the air, clear as a church bell. Celia felt her heart stop, then race forward in panic. "No," she said, moving toward them. "No, this is ridiculous. I'm not something to be won in a contest." But neither man was looking at her now. They were locked in a silent battle of wills, measuring each other's resolve. "Name your terms," Miles said. "Finally." Weston smiled, a dangerous curve of his lips. "Simple enough. A test of who deserves her more, who would risk more for her." "And what kind of test did you have in mind?" "The kind men have used to settle matters of honor since time began." Weston's hand moved to his gun again. 10 paces. Turn and fire. Winner takes all." A gasp went through the crowd. Celia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice strangled. "Miles, tell him this is insane." Miles looked at her, his eyes sad but determined. "If this is what it takes to settle things once and for all, then so be it." "No." Celia moved between them, fury burning away her shock. "I won't let you do this. Either of you. I'm not a prize to be won. I'm a person, with my own mind and heart." "She's right," Doc Hanson spoke up, his old voice cracking with authority. "This isn't the way to settle things. Not in my town." Weston didn't back down. "With all due respect, Doc, this is between me and Hart here." His eyes bored into Miles. "Unless he's not man enough to stand for what's his." It was a deliberate provocation, designed to leave Miles no choice but to accept or be branded a coward. Celia saw the trap and felt helpless to prevent Miles from walking into it. "Miles, please," she whispered. "Don't do this." Miles looked at her, really looked at her, as if memorizing her face. Then he turned back to Weston. Dawn, he said simply. At the creek bed outside of town. Weston nodded, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. Dawn it is. The crowd buzzed with excitement. Dead Lantern hadn't seen a duel in years. Not since the Prescott brothers had shot it out over a card game. This was better than any traveling show. If you gentlemen are determined to kill each other, Doc Hanson said wearily, I suppose I'd better be there to patch up the survivor, or pronounce him dead. With that grim pronouncement, the crowd began to disperse, hurrying to spread the news. Soon every soul in Dead Lantern would know that Quiet Miles Hart and the stranger from back east were going to duel at dawn for Celia's hand. Celia stood on the porch, shaking with rage and fear. Weston tipped his hat to her, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache despite everything. See you at dawn, he said, then turned and walked toward the saloon, his stride confident. Miles watched him go, then turned to Celia. The look in his eyes stopped the angry words on her tongue. Don't, he said quietly. Whatever you're going to say, just don't. He's baiting you, she said anyway, following him into the house. Can't you see that? He wants this fight. I know what he's doing. Miles moved to the cabinet where he kept his gun, a simple revolver he used for hunting and little else. And I'm giving him what he wants. Why? Celia demanded, tears threatening. Why risk your life for this madness? Miles checked the chambers of the gun, his movements precise. Because it needs to end, Celia, one way or another. He looked up at her. I've seen how you look at him, the questions in your eyes. We can't go on like this, with him circling and you caught in the middle. So your solution is to shoot him, or let him shoot you. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. That's not a solution, Miles. That's giving up. No. He set the gun down carefully. It's fighting for what matters. For who matters. The simple declaration struck Celia speechless. Miles had never been one for grand gestures or passionate declarations. His love had always been shown in small, consistent ways. A mended fence, a cup of coffee waiting in the morning, a gentle hand on her back when nightmares woke her. This willingness to risk everything, was new and terrifying. I don't want anyone to die because of me, she whispered. Miles moved to her, then finally closing the distance between them. His hands, calloused from years at the forge, cradled her face with impossible gentleness. Then you need to decide. Celia, once and for all, who do you want? Who do you love? His eyes searched hers. Is it him, the boy who promised you everything? Or is it me, the man who's tried to give you what he can? The questions she'd been avoiding crashed over her. Like a wave, who did she love? The answer wasn't as simple as choosing between past and present. It was about understanding what love meant, what it looked like in the harsh light of everyday life. I need time, she said. Miles stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. Time's the one thing we don't have. Not anymore. He looked toward the window, where the sun was already beginning its descent. Dawn comes whether we're ready for it or not. Outside, the wind picked up, sending dust swirling through the streets. Celia could hear voices carrying on it, excited, speculative. The town was already taking sides, placing bets. Her life, her heart, reduced to a morning's entertainment. I'll be at the forge, Miles said, picking up his hat. I have work to finish. Work? Celia stared at him in disbelief. You might die tomorrow and you're worried about work. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Life goes on, Celia, until it doesn't. He paused at the door. Think about what I asked. Really think. Not just about who you want, but why, and who you'd be if you chose him, or me. After he left, Celia sank into a chair, her legs no longer able to support her. The house around her, the home she'd built with Miles, suddenly felt like a stranger's place. The curtains she'd sewn, the dishes they'd eaten from, the bed they'd shared, all of it felt like props in a play she'd been performing without knowing the script. Who would she be if she chose Weston? The girl she'd been before, with stars in her eyes and dreams of adventure? Or someone new shaped by the years of hardship and the lessons they'd taught her? And if she chose Miles, would she always wonder what might have been? Would the ghost of her first love haunt their marriage until it withered and died? The questions circled like vultures, offering no answers. Night fell over Dead Lantern, bringing with it an unusual hush. Even the saloon, normally raucous until the small hours, grew quiet early. It was as if the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for dawn. Celia sat alone in her darkened house, a single lamp burning on the table. Miles hadn't come home. She wondered if he was still at the forge, or if he'd sought solitude elsewhere, to prepare for what morning would bring. A soft knock at the door startled her. For a wild moment she thought it might be Weston coming to make one last plea. But when she opened the door, she found Doc Hanson standing there, his old face grave in the lamplight. "May I come in?" he asked. Celia stepped back, allowing him entry. The doctor had delivered every baby in Dead Lantern for the past 30 years, tended every fever and broken bone. He'd set Miles's arm when a spooked horse had kicked him 2 winters back. Had checked Celia for fever when she'd first arrived in town, half-starved and hollow-eyed. "I won't stay long," he said, settling his bony frame into a chair. "Just wanted to see how you're holding up." "I'm fine," Celia said automatically, the lie bitter on her tongue. Doc Hanson snorted. "No, you're not, but that's to be expected given the circumstances." He fixed her with a penetrating gaze. "2 men getting ready to shoot each other over you. Not exactly an everyday occurrence." Celia flinched. "I never wanted this." "Of course not. No sensible woman would," the doctor sighed. "But here we are nonetheless. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? They won't listen to me, neither of them. Men rarely do when their pride is involved." Doc Hanson leaned forward. "But this isn't just about their pride, is it? It's about your heart, about who you truly want to build a life with." Tears burned in Celia's eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought I did. I thought I was settled, that the past was behind me. Then Weston rode into town and everything I thought I knew just fell apart." The doctor nodded, his eyes kind. "First, loves have a power all their own. They sink hooks into our hearts that never quite come loose." He paused. "But that doesn't mean they're the right loves, just the first." "How do I know?" Celia asked, the question torn from somewhere deep inside her. "How do I know which one is right?" "I look at the man, not the memory," Doc Hanson said simply. "You look at who they are, not who they once were or who they might become." He stood, joints creaking. "And you decide what kind of woman you want to be. Because that's what this is really about in the end. Not which man you choose, but which Celia you choose to be." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "Dawn's coming one way or another. Make your choice before the sun rises, or someone else will make it for you." After he left, Celia remained at the table, the doctor's words echoing in her mind. Which Celia did she want to be? The girl who had fled west with nothing but broken dreams and bitter memories? Or the woman who had built a life from the ashes, who had found quiet strength in everyday struggles? Outside, the wind had died down. The stars hung bright and cold in the sky, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath them. In a few hours they would fade, and the sun would rise on a day that would change everything. Celia closed her eyes, searching her heart for answers. As the night deepened around her, she began to understand what she had to do, what she should have done from the moment Weston Hale rode back into her life. Dawn was coming, and with it, a reckoning that would leave no one unchanged. The hours before dawn stretched like molasses. Celia sat at her kitchen table, watching shadows retreat as night gave way to grey morning light. She hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. Her mind was too full, her heart too heavy. Miles still hadn't come home. She wondered if he'd spent the night at the forge, preparing in his own quiet way for what was to come. Or maybe he'd gone somewhere to be alone with his thoughts, to make peace with whatever fate awaited him. Weston, she imagined, had likely spent the night at the saloon, bolstering his courage with whiskey and the admiration of strangers eager to hear tales of his search for his lost love. The thought left a bitter taste in her mouth. As the first hint of pink touched the eastern sky, Celia rose and dressed carefully. She chose her blue dress. The one Miles had once said brought out the color of her eyes. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons, clumsy with exhaustion and dread. The locket lay on the bedside table where she'd left it. Celia stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in her palm. With deliberate movements, she opened it, looking at the small portrait of Weston for the first time in years. Young. So young. His face unlined by sun and hardship, his eyes bright with promise and possibilities. The boy she'd fallen in love with, not the man who had ridden into town with demands and challenges. She snapped the locket shut and slipped it into her pocket. Not around her neck, not against her heart. Just a memento of a time long past. Outside, Dead Lantern was stirring earlier than usual. Figures moved through the grey light, heading toward the creek bed outside of town. No one wanted to miss the spectacle. Celia felt a surge of anger at their ghoulish excitement, their eagerness to witness pain and possibly death. She set out walking, not toward the creek where the duel would take place, but toward the forge. She needed to see Miles first, needed to tell him what she'd realized during the long, lonely night. The smithy was dark and cold. No fire burned in the forge, no hammer rang against metal. Miles wasn't there. He'd already left for the creek bed. Panic fluttered in Celia's chest. She was running out of time. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that would have been beautiful under any other circumstances. She hitched up her skirts and ran, not caring what anyone thought of the sight. Let them stare. Let them talk. None of it mattered compared to what was about to happen. The creek bed lay at the edge of town, a shallow depression carved by water that ran strong in spring but had dwindled to a trickle in the summer heat. It made a natural arena, with sloping sides where spectators could stand and watch whatever drama unfolded on the flat, sandy bottom. By the time Celia arrived, breathless and disheveled, a crowd had already gathered. It seemed the entire population of Dead Lantern had turned out, standing in somber groups along the creek's edge, their faces tight with anticipation. At the center of it all stood Miles and Weston, facing each other across 20 paces of sand. They made a stark contrast. Miles in his simple work clothes, his face calm despite the revolver hanging awkwardly at his side. Weston in his trail-worn but flashier gear, his gun belt settled on his hips with practiced ease. Doc Hanson stood, to one side, his medical bag at his feet, his expression grim. Mayor Thompson, who also served as the town's unofficial judge, stood nearby, clearly uncomfortable with his role as witness to the proceedings. "Stop," Celia called, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "This has gone far enough." All eyes turned to her as she made her way down the slope, slipping slightly on the loose dirt. Miles didn't look surprised to see her. Weston's face lit up with something like triumph, as if her presence confirmed everything he believed. "Celia," Miles said quietly as she reached the bottom of the creek bed. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she retorted. "This is madness, and you know it." Weston stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Celia, you don't need to worry. This will all be over soon, and we can—" "Be quiet," she snapped, surprising him into silence. "Both of you, listen to me. I won't let you do this. I won't let you risk your lives over some misguided sense of honor or ownership." "It's too late for that," Weston said, his voice hardening. "Your husband accepted my challenge, unless he's backing out." The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Miles met Celia's eyes. "I'm not backing out." "Why?" she demanded. "Why are you doing this?" "Because he called me out in front of the whole town," Miles answered, but his eyes told a different story. "Because I love you. Because I can't bear to lose you. Because some things are worth fighting for." Celia turned to Weston. "And you, why push for this? Why not just talk to me, convince me?" "Because words are cheap," Weston said, his gaze intense. "Anyone can say they love someone. It's what they're willing to do that matters." He glanced at Miles. "He claims to love you, but has he ever really fought for you? Has he ever risked everything just to keep you by his side?" "That's not what love is," Celia said, anger rising. "Love isn't about grand gestures or dangerous risks. It's about being there, every day, through good and bad." She looked at Miles, seeing the understanding dawn in his eyes. "It's about staying when it would be easier to leave." The crowd had gone silent, straining to hear every word of the unfolding drama. Celia could feel their eyes on her, judging, wondering, waiting to see which man she would choose. "If you really loved me," she said to Weston, You would never have put me in this position. You would never have turned my life into a spectacle for the whole town to gossip about." Hurt flashed across his face. "I rode 1,000 miles to find you, spent 5 years searching. If that's not love, what is?" "Obsession," she said quietly. "Not love." Weston's expression hardened. "You don't mean that. You're confused, Celia. You've been living this half-life for so long, you've forgotten what real passion feels like." He stepped closer. "But I can remind you. Come with me and I'll show you everything you've been missing." His words stirred something in her, a memory of the girl she'd been, of dreams that had burned bright and hot. For a moment she wavered, drawn to the fire he offered. Then she looked at Miles, steady, patient Miles who had never demanded more than she could give, who had built his life around her broken pieces without complaint, who was willing to die, rather than lose her, but would let her go if that was what she truly wanted. "No," she said, the word firm and final. "I know exactly what I want, Weston. And it's not you. Not anymore." The stunned silence that followed her declaration was broken by a slow clap from the edge of the creek bed. All eyes turned to see Jim, Darcy, owner of the saloon, making his way down the slope. Touching speech, he drawled, the smell of whiskey preceding him. "But these men have come to settle things proper, and I for one would like to see it happen." He looked around, gathering support. "Anyone else?" A murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. They hadn't come all this way, risen before dawn, to be denied their entertainment. "The lady's made her choice," Miles said, his voice carrying across the creek bed. "There's nothing left to settle." Weston's face had gone hard as stone. "The hell there isn't," he growled. "You took her from me, made her believe I'd abandoned her. 5 years of my life spent searching, and you expect me to just tip my hat and ride away because she says so?" "Yes," Miles said simply. "That's exactly what I expect." For a moment it seemed Weston might back down. The fight had gone out of his eyes, replaced by a bone-deep weariness that made him look older than his years. Then Jim Darcy called out, "You gonna let him win without even drawing?" "Hale?" After all that big talk at the saloon last night, something dangerous flashed in Weston's eyes. "No," he said, his hand moving to rest on his gun. "I'm not." Mayor Thompson stepped forward, sensing the shift in the air. "Gentlemen, if you're determined to go through with this, let's at least do it properly." He cleared his throat. "The terms are as follows. You will stand back to back, take 10 paces, turn, and fire. First man hit loses. If he survives, he leaves. Town immediately and makes no further claim on Mrs. Hart." Celia felt sick. Despite everything she'd said, they were going to do this anyway. Pride and whiskey and the expectations of a town hungry for drama had overruled sense and decency. "Miles," she said, moving toward him. But Doc Hanson caught her arm. "Stay back, girl," he said quietly. "You'll only make it worse if you get between them now." Miles looked at her one last time, his eyes full of things he'd never said aloud. Then he turned and took his position, back to back with Weston. 10 paces, Mayor Thompson called. "Begin." They started walking, each step taking them further apart. Celia counted silently, her heart hammering against her ribs. 1, 2, 3. Miles moved stiffly, his shoulders set in a straight line. Weston walked with the loose-limbed confidence of a man who had done this before. 4, 5, 6. The crowd held its collective breath. Doc Hanson's grip on Celia's arm tightened, keeping her from running forward. 7, 8, 9. Celia saw it happen as if in slow motion. Weston's hand moved to his gun before the final step, before the command to turn and fire, a cheat's move, meant to catch Miles unaware. "Miles!" she screamed. "Behind you!" Miles turned just as Weston drew, the morning sun glinting off his revolver. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously, echoing across the creek bed and sending birds scattering from nearby trees. Smoke hung in the air, acrid and thin. Through it, Celia saw both men still standing, facing each other across the sand. Then Weston staggered. His hand went to his shoulder, where a dark stain was spreading across his shirt. His gun slipped from his fingers, landing with a dull thud on the sand. Miles lowered his revolver slowly, his face grim but unsurprised. He'd hit what he aimed at, Not the heart, not to kill, but to stop. Doc Hansen released Celia's arm and hurried forward, medical bag in hand. The crowd burst into excited chatter, some disappointed by the lack of a fatal outcome, others already embellishing the story they would tell for years to come. Celia ran to Miles, reaching him just as he holstered his gun with shaking hands. "You're not hit?" she asked, her eyes scanning him frantically for signs of injury. "No," he said, his voice rough. "I'm fine." She threw her arms around him then, her relief so powerful it made her knees weak. Miles held her tight, his heartbeat strong and steady against her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "So sorry it came to this." "Don't be." He drew back, looking down at her with eyes that held no accusation, no anger. "Some things are worth fighting for." Across the creek bed, Doc Hansen was examining Weston's wound, his gnarled hands gentle but efficient. "Clean through," he announced. "Missed the bone. He'll live to regret his foolishness, though the arm will be stiff for a while." Weston sat on a rock, his face pale with pain and defeat. When he looked up and saw Celia in Miles's arms, something in his eyes died. "You really chose him," he said, his voice barely carrying across the distance between them. "After everything, we were to each other." Celia stepped away from Miles, moving toward Weston, not out of love or longing, but out of a need for closure, for both of them. "I chose the man I am now, not the girl I was then," she said when she reached him. "We were children, Weston, playing at forever without understanding what it meant." He looked away, his jaw tight. "It wasn't a game to me." "Maybe not." She sighed. "But it's over. It's been over for 5 years. I've built a different life, become a different woman. Because you thought I'd abandoned you." There was a desperate edge to his voice. "If you'd known I was coming back, it wouldn't have changed anything." Celia reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket. "I kept this because it was all I had left of a time when things were simpler, when I believed in fairy tales and happy endings." She placed it in his good hand, closing his fingers around it. "But I don't need it anymore." Weston stared at the locket, then at her. "So that's it? I lose the duel? I lose you? End of story?" "You never had me to lose," she said gently. "Not the me I am now." She turned and walked back to Miles, feeling lighter with each step. Behind her, she heard Doc Hansen telling Weston he needed to get him to the office to properly clean and bandage the wound. The crowd was beginning to disperse, the excitement over, though the story would be told and retold around dinner tables and saloon bars for months to come. The day Miles' heart outdrew the stranger from back east in a duel for his wife's hand, except it hadn't been for her hand, not really. It had been for something deeper, for the right to build a life together, day by day, choice by choice. "Let's go home," Miles said, taking her hand. Home, the word resonated within her, carrying new meaning. Not just a place, but a person, a choice, a future. They walked back toward town side by side, leaving the creek bed and its drama behind. The sun was fully up now, promising another hot, dusty day in Dead Lantern. But to Celia, it felt like the first day of something new. Neither spoke until they reached their house, the small, sturdy structure that had sheltered them for 3 years. Inside, everything was exactly as they'd left it. Dishes on the shelf, quilt on the bed, Miles' boots by the door. But it felt different somehow, as if the air itself had changed. "Are you all right?" Celia asked, as Miles sank into a chair. At the kitchen table, now that they were alone, she could see the slight tremor in his hands, the paleness beneath his tan. "Yes," he said, then reconsidered. "No, I don't know." He looked up at her. "I've never shot a man before." Celia filled a cup with water and placed it in front of him. "You didn't kill him." "I could have." His voice was low. "Part of me wanted to." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Miles had never been a violent man. The knowledge that he had found that capacity within himself, for her, was both humbling and terrifying. "But you didn't," she said, sitting across from him. "You chose not to." Miles took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving hers. "Just like you chose not to go with him." "Yes." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "I meant what I said," Miles, I know what I want. Who I want. Even after all this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing the duel, the drama, the reopening of old wounds. Even knowing he didn't abandon you. That he came back and you were gone? Celia considered the question. It deserved an honest answer. I can't say I never wondered what might have been. If I'd waited one more day, if he'd come back sooner, if my father hadn't died. She squeezed his hand. But we can't live in what-ifs. We can only live in what is. And what is you and me here, now. The tension in Miles's shoulders eased, slightly. And that's enough for you? More than enough. She smiled, the first real smile in days. It's everything. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The simple gesture held more tenderness than any passionate declaration. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Celia opened it to find Doc Hanson standing there, his face grave. How's the patient? Miles asked, rising from his chair. Patched up and resting at my office, the doctor said. But that's not why I'm here. He looked at Celia. Weston's asking for you, says there's something he needs to tell you before he leaves town. Celia felt Miles stiffen beside her. He doesn't need to see her, he said. He's said enough. It's all right, Celia told him, placing a calming hand on his arm. I should go. For closure, if nothing else. Miles looked like he wanted to object, but instead he nodded. Do you want me to come with you? The question, asked without a trace of jealousy or doubt, confirmed what Celia already knew, that she had chosen well, that this man with his quiet strength and steady heart was worth every struggle. No, she said, I need to do this alone. Doc Hanson's office was at the other end of town, a tidy building with a small room in the back for patients who needed overnight care. Weston was sitting up in the bed, his left arm bandaged and held in a sling. He looked pale but alert, his eyes brightening when Celia entered. You came, he said. Doc said you wanted to talk to me. She remained standing near the door, maintaining her distance. I'm listening. Weston shifted, wincing as the movement jarred his wounded shoulder. I wanted to say I'm sorry for causing trouble, for putting you in the middle of a fight you didn't ask for. The apology surprised her. It wasn't what she'd expected from the proud, defiant man who had challenged her husband to a duel. Thank you, she said simply. And I wanted to give you something. With his good hand, he reached under the pillow and pulled out a yellowed envelope. I've carried this for 5 years, hoping I'd find you someday to give it to you. Celia took the envelope, noting her name written on the front in familiar handwriting. What is this? A letter from your father. Weston's eyes held hers. He wrote it the night before he died. Asked me to make sure you got it if anything happened to him. The world seemed to tilt beneath Celia's feet. My father, she whispered. But how? Why? He knew he was in trouble. Deep trouble. Weston sighed. That's why he sent me to try to get money from my uncle in the next county. He was afraid of what might happen if he couldn't pay his debts. Celia stared at the envelope in her hands, at her name in her father's sprawling script. A message from beyond the grave, a piece of the past she thought was lost forever. I should have given it to you before I left, Weston continued, but everything happened so fast. Your father dead, men watching the house. I thought it would be safer to keep it with me until I came back. His eyes clouded with old regret. I never imagined you'd be gone when I returned. Celia's fingers trembled as she tucked the letter into her pocket. She wasn't ready to read it. Not yet. Not here. Thank you, she said again, and meant it. Weston nodded, then looked away. I'm leaving as soon as Doc says I can ride, heading further west, California maybe. I think that's for the best. He met her eyes again, a flash of the old Weston visible in his rueful smile. He's a good man, your blacksmith. Better than me, I reckon. Not better, Celia said gently. Just different. Right for me now in a way you were right for me then. Weston absorbed this, then nodded once more. Be happy, Celia. That's all I ever wanted for you, even if I went about it all wrong. As she left the doctor's office, Celia felt the letter in her pocket, a tangible weight connecting her past to her present. Whatever it contained, explanations, apologies, final words of love. It was a gift she hadn't expected. a chance for closure she'd long ago stopped hoping for. The streets of Dead Lantern were quiet now, the excitement of the morning's duel giving way to the routine of everyday life. But things had changed subtly but irrevocably. Celia could feel it in the way people looked at her as she passed. With respect, with curiosity, with a new understanding. She was no longer just the blacksmith's quiet wife. She was a woman with a story. A woman who had faced her past and made her choice in front of the entire town. Miles was waiting for her at home, his worried expression easing when she walked through the door. "Everything all right?" he asked. Celia crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes," she said. "Everything is all right." And for the first time in 5 years, she truly believed it. That night, after Miles had fallen asleep, Celia sat by the window with her father's letter. The moon hung full and bright in the sky, providing just enough light to read by. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her father's handwriting filled the page, as familiar to her as her own. Reflection. "My dearest Celia," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone and I've left you to face the consequences of my failures alone. For that, I am sorrier than words can express." Tears blurred her vision as she read on, absorbing her father's final words, his regrets, his love, his hopes for her future. One passage in particular caught at her heart. "I've sent Weston to get money from his uncle. It's a desperate gamble, but if anyone can convince the old miser to part with his dollars, it's that silver-tongued boy who loves you so much. Trust him, Celia. Whatever happens to me, trust that he'll come back for you. That's the one thing in this uncertain world I'm sure of. That boy would move heaven and earth to keep you safe." Celia lowered the letter, her throat tight with unshed tears. All these years she'd believed Weston had abandoned her in her darkest hour, had built her life around that belief, around the lesson that the only person she could truly rely on was herself. But he had come back, just as her father had believed he would. Too late to change what had happened, but he had come back. And now, years later, he had found her again, had challenged her quiet life, forced her to confront the past she'd buried, had made her choose, consciously and deliberately, the path she wanted to walk. Outside, an owl called, its lonely cry echoing through the night. Celia folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. Then she slipped into bed beside Miles, who stirred slightly, reaching for her even in sleep. Tomorrow she would show him the letter, would share this piece of her past that had found its way into her present. They would read it together, and perhaps Miles would understand a little better the girl she had been, the woman she had become. But that was for tomorrow. Tonight, she simply curled against his warmth, grateful for the steady beat of his heart, for the arms that held her without demanding, for the love that had grown slowly but surely between them. "You weren't my first love," she whispered, echoing the words from the premise of their story. "But you are my last." In the darkness, Miles smiled in his sleep, as if he had heard and understood. As if he knew that sometimes the love that lasts isn't the one that burns brightest, but the one that burns longest. Steady, enduring, like the glow of coals in a blacksmith's forge. The week after the duel passed in a strange hush. Dead Lantern seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next in the drama that had captivated the town. Celia felt eyes on her wherever she went, curious, speculative, sometimes envious. 2 men had been willing to die for her. In a place where most stories ended in disappointment, hers had the shine of romance. But reality was quieter than stories. Miles returned to his forge, hammering metal into useful shapes with the same steady hands that had won the duel. Celia tended their home, cooked meals, hung washing in the yard. To casual observers, life had returned to normal. Beneath the surface, though, everything had changed. The letter from her father had opened a door that Celia had thought locked forever. She and Miles had read it together the morning after she received it, sitting at their kitchen table with hands clasped. "So he was telling the truth," Miles had said, his voice thoughtful. "He did go for help." "Yes." Celia traced her father's handwriting with a gentle finger. All these years I thought he'd abandoned me, that when things got hard he ran. Miles had been quiet for a moment. Does it change how you feel, knowing the truth? The question held no accusation, no fear, just genuine curiosity. It was one of the things Celia loved most about him, his ability to face difficult truths head-on. About Weston? No. She met Miles's eyes. What we had was a lifetime ago. I'm not that girl anymore. Relief had softened his features, though he'd tried to hide it. And about us? Celia had leaned forward then, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that held more passion than any they'd shared before. It makes me more certain than ever, she'd whispered against his mouth. You're the one I choose. Today, tomorrow, always. Now as she hung sheets on the line behind their house, Celia found herself smiling at the memory. The past week had brought a new openness between them. Miles had asked about her life before, about the girl she'd been, about her dreams and fears. And for the first time, she'd answered without hesitation or pain. In turn, he'd shared more of himself, stories of his childhood in a mining town further east, of his apprenticeship to an ill-tempered blacksmith who had nonetheless taught him everything he knew, of his journey west after the mine closed and work dried up. They were building something new on the foundation of what they'd already had, something stronger, more honest. The sound of a horse approaching pulled Celia from her thoughts. She turned, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, to see Doc Hanson riding up. "Afternoon, Mrs. Hart," he called, dismounting with the stiffness of age. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." Celia wiped her hands on her apron. "Can I offer you some coffee?" "That would be welcome." The doctor followed her into the house, settling his lanky frame at the kitchen table, while Celia put the kettle on the stove. She could sense there was purpose behind his visit. Doc Hanson wasn't one for social calls without reason. "How's your patient?" she asked, though she hadn't inquired about Weston in days. "Healing well, too well perhaps." The doctor accepted the cup she offered with a nod of thanks. "He's determined to leave tomorrow, though I've told him another week of rest would be wiser." "He never was one to take advice," Celia said, surprised at how little she felt at the news. No pain, no regret, just a distant fondness like recalling a story she'd once heard. "No, he wasn't." Doc Hanson studied her over the rim of his cup. "He asked me to give you something, said he'd deliver it himself, but thought it might be awkward." From his pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Celia took it, feeling its negligible weight in her palm. "What is it?" "Don't know. Not my business to know." The doctor sipped his coffee. "Though I'd guess it's that locket you gave back to him. Man like that holds on to symbols." Celia set the package aside unopened. "I'll look at it later." Doc Hanson nodded, approving. "Wise choice." He set down his cup. "There's something else you should know. He's not leaving alone." This caught Celia's attention. "What do you mean?" "Lucy Simmons has decided to go with him." The doctor's eyes twinkled with the delight of delivering good gossip. "Says she's always wanted to see California, and she's tired of pouring drinks for miners who can't hold their liquor." Lucy Simmons was the youngest barmaid at the town's saloon, a pretty girl with red hair and a sharp tongue. Celia had spoken to her only a handful of times, but she'd always seemed smart and restless, too big a spirit for a small dying town like Dead Lantern. "When did this happen?" Celia asked, genuinely curious. "Started the night of the duel, from what I hear. She helped me tend his wound, stayed to talk after I left." Doc Hanson shrugged. "One thing led to another, I suppose. Young people." He said it with the fond exasperation of a man long past the follies of youth. Celia couldn't help but smile. The thought of Weston finding someone new, someone who might be a better match for the man he'd become, lifted a weight she hadn't realized she still carried. Guilt, perhaps, or responsibility for his happiness. "I'm glad," she said, and meant it. "I hope they'll be happy together. Time will tell." The doctor finished his coffee and stood. "I should get back. Just thought you'd want to know." After he left, Celia sat looking at the small package on the table. part of her wanted to leave. It unopened to let the past stay in the past, but curiosity won out. Carefully, she untied the string and unwrapped the paper. Inside was the locket, as Doc Hansen had guessed. But it wasn't closed as she had expected. Weston had removed his portrait from one side, leaving it empty. In the other side, where there had never been a picture, he had placed a small, folded note. With hesitant fingers, Celia unfolded it. The message was brief. For new beginnings. Duel simple. Direct. A goodbye without drama or lingering claims. A recognition that their story was over, and new ones were beginning. Celia closed the locket, feeling its lightness without the weight of the past it had carried for so long. An empty locket, a blank page, a fresh start. When Miles came home that evening, dusty and tired from a day at the forge, she showed him the locket and the note. That was decent of him, Miles said, choosing his words carefully. Yes, it was. Celia set the locket aside. Doc says he's leaving tomorrow with Lucy Simmons. Miles raised his eyebrows. The barmaid? That was fast. Some connections happen that way. Celia smiled, thinking of how differently her relationship with Miles had developed, slowly, carefully built on need and respect before desire ever entered the picture. Are you going to see him off? Miles asked, and there was no jealousy. In the question, just genuine concern for what she might want. Celia considered it. No, she said finally. I think we've said all we need to say to each other. Better to let him start his new journey without looking back. Miles nodded. Relief, evident in the relaxing of his shoulders. He wasn't a jealous man by nature, but he was human. The thought of his wife saying goodbye to a man who had once claimed her heart couldn't be easy. What about the locket? He asked. What will you do with it? Celia picked it up, letting it dangle from its chain. Empty now. Waiting. I thought, maybe someday we might put new pictures in it. Ours perhaps, or... She hesitated, then pressed on. Or our children's, if we're blessed with them. Miles's eyes widened. They had never discussed children before. In their careful, measured relationship, it had seemed like a topic for some distant future. You want children? He asked, his voice rough with sudden emotion. Yes. Celia met his gaze steadily. With you, if you want them too. Miles crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms with a fierceness that took her breath away. Yes, he whispered against her hair. God, yes. That night, they came together with a new urgency, a new openness. The barriers that had stood between them, Celia's guarded heart, Miles's careful restraint, fell away, leaving only truth and need and love. For the first time, Celia gave herself completely, without holding back any part of herself. And Miles, who had always been gentle, found a passion he hadn't known he possessed. Later, lying in the darkness with Miles's steady heartbeat beneath her ear, Celia thought about beginnings and endings, about choices and chances, about the strange, winding paths that brought people together or tore them apart. I love you, she whispered, words she had rarely spoken even after 3 years of marriage. Miles's arms tightened around her. I know, he said simply. I've always known, even when you couldn't say it. Morning brought the news that Weston and Lucy had left town before dawn, headed west toward California, and whatever future awaited them there. Celia felt a moment of quiet sadness, not for what might have been, but for the final closing of a chapter in her life. But new chapters were opening. 2 weeks after Weston's departure, Celia missed her monthly time. A month later, she was certain, enough to tell Miles the news. His joy was a beautiful thing to witness, lighting his usually serious face from within. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around their small kitchen, laughing like a boy. Careful, she protested, laughing with him. I'm in a delicate condition. He set her down immediately, his face comically contrite. I'm sorry I didn't hurt you, did I, or the baby? No, she assured him, touched by his concern. We're both fine, but you might want to save your strength. I have a feeling the next 7 months are going to be challenging for both of us. As summer gave way to fall, Celia's body changed, rounding with new life. The town watched with approving eyes. After the drama of the duel, the simpler story. of a baby on the way was a welcome return to normalcy. Women stopped by with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Men clapped Miles on the shoulder at the general store, offering congratulations and good-natured warnings about sleepless nights to come. For the first time since arriving in Dead Lantern, Celia felt truly part of the community. Not just the blacksmith's quiet wife, but a woman with a place of her own, with connections and friendships and a future taking root. One crisp October afternoon, as Celia sat on the porch mending one of Miles's shirts, a wagon pulled up in front of their house. A woman climbed down, elegant despite the dust of travel, her face both familiar and strange. "Celia," she called, approaching with hesitant steps. "Celia Grant." Celia set aside her sewing, one hand automatically going to her swollen belly as she stood. "It's Celia Hart now," she corrected gently. "Can I help you?" The woman came closer and recognition dawned. "Aunt Eleanor? Is it really you?" Eleanor Grant, her father's younger sister, nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Oh, my dear girl, I've been searching for you for so long." They embraced awkwardly, Celia's pregnancy keeping them at a distance. When they pulled apart, Eleanor wiped her eyes with a lace-edged handkerchief. "How did you find me?" Celia asked, gesturing for her aunt to join her on the porch. "A letter." Eleanor settled into the offered chair. "From a young man named Weston Hale. He wrote to say he'd found you, that you were well and married." Her eyes dropped to Celia's stomach, though he didn't mention this development. "It's recent," Celia said, her mind spinning. Weston had written to her aunt, had thought to close that circle too before starting his new life. "But why are you here? After all this time?" Eleanor's face grew serious. "There are things you need to know, Celia, about your father, about what happened after you left, and about the inheritance that's been waiting for you." "Inheritance?" Celia shook her head in confusion. "My father had nothing but debts when he died." "That's what everyone thought," Eleanor agreed. "But 6 months after his death, an old mining claim he'd staked years ago struck gold. Not a fortune, but enough to pay off his debts with something left over." She reached for Celia's hand. "It's been held in trust for you all this time. I've been trying to find you to tell you." The news was so unexpected that Celia could only stare. Money from her father, the man whose gambling and debts had cost her everything, in the end had left her something after all. It felt like a message from beyond the grave, a final apology. "I don't know what to say," she managed finally. "Say you'll accept it," Eleanor urged. "It's yours by right, enough to make a real difference in your life, especially with a baby on the way." Celia's mind raced with possibilities. They could build a bigger house. Miles could hire help at the forge, expand his business. They could provide for their child in ways they hadn't dared to dream of. But first, she needed to share the news with Miles. "My husband will be home soon," she told her aunt. "Stay and meet him, have dinner with us." Eleanor smiled, the family resemblance suddenly clear in the curve of her lips. "I'd like that very much." When Miles arrived home to find a well-dressed stranger sitting with his wife, his first reaction was wary caution. But as Celia explained who Eleanor was and why she had come, his expression shifted from suspicion to amazement. "An inheritance," he repeated, sinking into a chair. "From your father," Eleanor nodded. "Not a fortune, but substantial. Enough to make a meaningful difference." Miles looked at Celia, his eyes searching hers. "What do you want to do with it?" The question, so typical of Miles, thinking first of her wishes, her needs, brought tears to Celia's eyes. Another man might have immediately started making plans, assuming control of the unexpected windfall. But Miles waited, giving her the space to decide. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'd like to invest in our future. In the forge, in a bigger house for our growing family." She looked from Miles to her aunt. "And maybe set some aside to help others who find themselves in the kind of trouble I was in when I first came here. People who need a second chance." Miles reached for her hand, pride shining in his eyes. "I think that's a fine plan." Later, after Eleanor had retired to the town's small hotel with promises to return for breakfast, Miles and Celia sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the deepening blue of the evening sky. It's strange, Celia mused, her hand resting on her belly where their child grew. A month ago, I thought I knew exactly how our life would be. Small, quiet, just the two of us getting by. She looked at Miles. Now everything's changing so fast. Are you happy with the changes, he asked. Celia considered the question. Yes, she said finally, but not because of the money or even the baby, though both are blessings. She took his hand. I'm happy because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with. Miles brought her hand to his lips. That's all I've ever wanted, for you to feel at home with me. I do. Celia leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she'd never thought possible. It just took a ghost from my past to make me see how much the present means to me. Inside her, their child kicked, a gentle reminder of the future taking shape. Miles felt it too, his hand joining hers on the swell of her belly, his face alight with wonder. This was love, Celia realized, not the desperate passion of youth, burning bright and fast, but something steadier, stronger, a flame that warmed, without consuming, that illuminated without blinding. You weren't my first love, she said softly, but you are my last, my only true love. Miles gathered her closer. And you are mine, first, last, and always. Above them, stars continued their ancient journey across the sky. In town, lights winked out one by one as dead lanterns settled into the rhythms of night. And on a small porch at the edge of everything, a man and woman held each other, bound by choice and chance and the quiet miracle of finding home in another's heart. The end.